Let's start with something that barely sounds real. There's a 25-year-old forward walking around out there who has already demolished records that stood untouched for decades. Numbers that some of the most celebrated names in the sport never came close to reaching. Erling Haaland put 36 goals into Premier League nets in a single campaign, a mark that used to look permanently out of reach. Years before that, he stuck 9 goals in one match at the Under-20 World Cup. He also became the quickest player ever to hit 50 international goals, reaching the milestone in under 50 caps for Norway. Most people read numbers like that and file him away as a very good striker. The truth is that Haaland's story runs a lot deeper than a tally of finishes. Elite sports surrounded him from the first day of his life, and once you understand his family, the rise starts to look even stranger. His father, Alf-Inge Håland, played in the Premier League before injury problems eventually shut his career down, with a collision involving Roy Keane becoming the moment forever attached to that story. His mother, Gry Merita Braut, was a serious athlete in Norway in her own right. And here's a detail that always catches people off guard. Erling was actually born in Leeds, England, while his father was playing there, and the family only moved back to Norway when he was 3. So this isn't the standard tale of a gifted kid who put in the hours and made it. Haaland's path looks like a collision of genetics, timing, family history, and obsessive training, all pointing in one direction. With Norway now genuinely dangerous at international level, more people than ever are digging into the story behind the goal-scoring machine. To really get it, you have to rewind to a bitter rivalry that was burning long before he was old enough to know what football was. April 2001, Old Trafford. Alf-Inge Håland is in a Manchester City shirt, facing Manchester United. Roy Keane, United's captain, launches into a challenge on him, and the tackle instantly becomes one of the most notorious images in Premier League history. It looked vicious, but one detail regularly gets mangled in the retelling. That single challenge did not simply end Alf-Inge's career. Reports indicate the tackle involved his right knee, while the surgery that followed later concerned his left. The controversy detonated anyway, largely because Keane wrote about the incident in his autobiography and described it as deliberate payback for an earlier confrontation between the two. Haaland never got back to the level he'd previously reached. Within a couple of years, his professional career was finished, and everything he'd spent so long constructing suddenly looked entirely different. When that tackle happened, his son Erling was 9 months old, far too small to register any of the drama swirling around his father. So did that history hand Erling extra fuel? Did he grow up chasing heights his father never got to see? He has never publicly framed his career that way, so calling it a revenge mission would be guesswork. What isn't guesswork is the athletic background he came from. His mother competed in the heptathlon, 7 track and field disciplines demanding speed, power, endurance, and technique all at once. Look at what that produced. A Premier League footballer on one side, a high-level multi-event athlete on the other. Their son grows to roughly 1.95 meters, hits sprint speeds that shouldn't belong to a man that size, and starts scoring at an absurd clip. Genetics, environment, coaching, mentality, and opportunity all landed in the same person. Erling arrives in Leeds in July 2000, while his father is playing for Leeds United, but England doesn't hold him long. He grows up in Bryne, a Norwegian town of around 12,000 people, and as a kid he refuses to specialize. Handball, golf, track and field, essentially anything with a scoreboard. At 5 years old, he reportedly cleared 1.63 meters in the standing long jump, a figure widely reported as a world best for his age group. That same competitive 5-year-old joins Bryne's football setup, and eventually football wins. The road from a small Norwegian town to becoming the most feared striker in Europe wasn't a straight line, though. There were specific stops that transformed his game, and this is where the numbers start losing touch with reality. He begins his senior journey at hometown club Bryne while still 15, before properly breaking into the first team, and he tears the reserve side's league apart with 18 goals in 14 matches. At 16, he moves to Molde and works under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. Then comes Red Bull Salzburg, a far bigger stage, and that's the moment the football world realizes something unusual is happening. In the 2019-20 Champions League, Haaland is 19 years old and trading blows with Liverpool and Napoli. He scores on his Champions League debut, then again in his second appearance, then his third, fourth, and fifth. 5 consecutive Champions League games with a goal to open his career, something no teenager had managed before. Somehow that wasn't even the wildest statistic attached to his name that year. At the 2019 FIFA Under-20 World Cup in Poland, Norway meet Honduras and Haaland completely loses control of himself in the best possible way. 9 goals in one match. 9 inside 90 minutes. Norway win 12-0, and he sets the record for the most goals by a single player in one Under-20 World Cup game. By December 2019, Borussia Dortmund have seen enough and sign him from Salzburg in a deal reportedly worth around 20 million euros, a fee that looks laughable in hindsight. He makes his Bundesliga debut against Augsburg, comes off the bench, and scores a hat-trick. By the time Manchester City activate his reported 60 million release clause in 2022, there's no secret left to keep. Europe has watched him dismantle defenses for years. Even so, English football wasn't ready for what came next. The 2022-23 season, his first in the Premier League, and he rewrites the record books. 36 goals and 35 league appearances, a new single-season Premier League scoring record. 52 goals across all competitions. The Golden Boot, the European Golden Shoe, a Champions League title, a Premier League title, an FA Cup, and on top of all of it, City completing the historic treble. That's year 1 in England, at 22 years old. Underneath the trophies and highlight reels, though, something gets lost. There's an actual person behind the goal-scoring machine, and he's far more layered than the robotic caricature built around him. Because here's the fascinating part. He scores so relentlessly that people joke he was assembled in a laboratory, yet those around him describe someone very different from the cold, unstoppable figure fans see every weekend. His life away from the pitch is nearly as regimented as his life on it. He has spoken about meditation and about taking sleep extremely seriously, and reports have highlighted habits like wearing blue light blocking glasses at night. Nutrition, recovery, rest, and training are treated as parts of one system. Nothing gets left to luck when your body is the weapon. And that monster striker image cracks sometimes. When City finally win the Champions League in 2023 and seal the treble, cameras catch him crying on the pitch. The man who spends 90 minutes looking impossible to knock over is suddenly overwhelmed. The contrast gets sharper when teammates talk. They describe him as funny, relaxed, far more grounded than his intimidating reputation suggests. Kevin De Bruyne has praised how uncomplicated he is to play alongside. His movement carries obvious intent. Attack the space, commit to the run, trust the pass to arrive. Simple in theory, brutal to defend in practice. He goes after the area the ball is traveling into again and again, and that apparent predictability is the whole trick. He has studied angles, timing, and the tiny pockets inside the box so thoroughly that something which looks basic becomes almost unstoppable. Defenders know exactly what he wants, and he still arrives first. There's one challenge club trophies could never fix, though, proving himself with Norway on the biggest international stage. The 2026 World Cup finally hands him that platform. If Norway go deep, every goal and every knockout tie carries a completely different weight, because international football is where he has had far fewer chances to build a legacy. Which loops the family story back around in a way that feels almost written. Remember April 2001 and that clash between Keane and Alf-Inge, with Erling 9 months old. The tackle became permanently welded to his father's name, even though blaming that one moment for ending his career is misleading. Now, 25 years later, Alf-Inge gets to watch his son chase records at the summit of the sport. One generation had its Premier League run cut short by injury. The next produced one of the deadliest finishers the game has seen. And the circle closes even tighter. Haaland was born in Leeds. His father built part of his career in English football and became attached to one of its ugliest rivalries. Now Erling has the chance to write his own chapter against the country where his life began. Any Norway-England showdown carries extra voltage because of it. Then there are the numbers. 36 Premier League goals. 52 in a single season. 9 in one under-20 World Cup match. The treble, the Golden Boot, the European Golden Shoe, Norway's all-time scoring records. Yet one prize is still missing from the list. Major international silverware with Norway. Club football has already given him medals, records, and global fame. International football offers something else entirely. A chance to drag his country somewhere his father's generation never got close to. Maybe that's what makes his story so strange. For almost anyone else, a treble, a scoring record, and a national goal-scoring record would represent a finished career. With Haaland, it feels like we're somewhere in the middle of the book, because every record he breaks creates a new target, every trophy inflates expectations, and every ridiculous season makes people ask what's left. That's the peculiar cost of making the impossible look ordinary. Score once and people expect two. Score twice and they want the hat trick. Go a handful of games without scoring and the questions start. That pressure isn't easing either. He's entering the age range where elite strikers are usually at their most lethal, already carrying the strength, pace, movement, and instinct, and now adding experience on top. That should frighten defenders more than any statistic, because the kid from Bryne reached the summit and kept climbing. The next level may not even involve more goals. He has pushed the numbers so far that another 5 or 10 barely shifts the conversation. The real battle now is legacy, and where his name eventually sits. That's where it gets complicated, because football doesn't rank its greats on statistics alone. The biggest names are remembered for what they produced when everything hung in the balance. Knockout ties, finals, title races, moments where one touch decides a season. Haaland understands that comes with the job. Defenders analyze every run. Coaches design entire structures around cutting his supply. Critics pounce on every flat performance, and social media can inflate one missed chance into a week-long argument. He keeps showing up anyway. Perhaps that's the most dangerous thing about him. After the records, the trophies, the hype, and the criticism, his job stays brutally simple. Find the space, attack it, finish. Everybody knows what's coming. Stopping it is a completely separate problem. That problem gets worse when you consider how much the game has reshaped itself around him. Teams no longer just defend Manchester City, they prepare specifically for one player. Center backs sit tighter, midfielders drop deeper, defensive lines adjust, because one mistimed step gives him the exact gap he wants. It creates a strange trap. The better he gets, the more opposition planning revolves around him, and when he doesn't score, critics claim he vanished. Often his movement is doing damage without the ball ever reaching him, dragging markers out of position and prizing open lanes for teammates. He isn't judged like a normal striker anymore, and that ship sailed long ago. He built these expectations himself. Spend years making 2-goal nights routine and hat tricks feel unremarkable, and people stop celebrating and start demanding. Now his real opponent is the standard he created. This is the genuinely risky stage of his career, not because he's declining, but because greatness is being treated as the baseline. Managers adapt. Defenders study. Injuries change everything. Physical demands never let up. His challenge isn't proving he can dominate, since that's settled. It's staying one move ahead while the entire sport works on shutting him down. Which is exactly why the obsessive details matter. The sleep, the recovery, the nutrition, the constant maintenance. Small advantages become enormous when everyone is hunting for a weakness. He isn't chasing one great season anymore. He's chasing the kind of longevity that converts absurd statistics into history. The goals grabbed everyone's attention. The next several years decide whether he's remembered as a devastating striker of his era or spoken about alongside the greatest finishers the sport has produced. And once names like Cristiano Ronaldo and Lionel Messi enter the discussion, raw ability stops being enough. Now it's longevity, consistency, major trophies, and delivering under pressure, season after season. That's the mountain in front of him. At his peak, he generates numbers that look like a video game glitch, but the legends he's pursuing didn't dominate for 2 or 3 years. They stayed at the top while opponents adapted, managers changed, teammates came and went, and their bodies absorbed thousands of high-intensity minutes. He knows the clock keeps running. Every season adds goals and adds mileage, which makes his preparation obsession more important, not less. The question isn't whether he can score 50 in a hot season. We've seen that. It's whether he can sustain it long enough to force his way into football's most untouchable conversations. We're watching a modern striker stretch the limits in real time, and that isn't social media noise. The Premier League single-season record is gone. Historic Champions League milestones have fallen. Norway's all-time international scoring record went to him while he was still in his 20s. And somehow the biggest chapter still feels unwritten, because after the goals, the golden boots and the treble, there's one more summit, doing something historic with Norway on the international stage. That would complete the family arc. His father represented Norway but never reached a World Cup, while Erling has spent his career hauling his country toward heights that once seemed impossible. And despite the mythology around that Old Trafford tackle, the end of Alf-Inge's career was always more complicated than one moment. Nobody was prepared for Erling Haaland, and his final legacy is still being written. If you enjoyed this story, hit the like button, subscribe, and share the video with another football fan. And drop a comment below. When Haaland finally hangs up his boots, where do you think he'll rank among the greatest strikers of all time?